Good evening. Well, welcome to this important briefing about EDF's latest consultations. I'm Alison Downs, I'm the Executive Director of Stop Sizewell C, and I'm joined by Paul Collins, who's the Chair, and Charles McDowell, who is on our steering group and is also Chair of the B1122 Action Group. We're going to divide the session into two sections. We're going to start with sharing some observations about EDF's new proposals. We'll try and make this fairly brief and focus on the two issues that we consider to be most significant. So Charles is going to begin by talking about EDF's transport related consultations, and then Paul will talk about the coastal issues. I'll talk briefly about the wider context, what's going on in the big wide world, and we'll follow this with a Q&A session. So as I said, if you can use the comments box to send your questions, we'll try and get through as many as we can. We'll then talk about the practicalities of responding to these consultations, followed by another opportunity to ask questions. And I should say that all of this information is now on our website. So our website is stopsizewellc.org, and in the top bar you will see a menu item called Take Part in the Planning Process. And so I encourage you to look at that either during or after this meeting. So I'm going to say over to you, Charles.
Thanks, Ali. Well, I don't know if everybody's had a chance to dig through our latest missive from EDF, but transport features fairly largely. So I'm going to just cover off some points about that. And
let me in. I've done all that. I know how to do it.
The first thing I'm going to say over somebody who forgot to be muted is that I'm amazed and flabbergasted that EDF is still floundering around between road, rail and sea at this late stage. It's absolutely amazing. And I just give you a quick quote. They say, this consultation outlines where there may be potential to increase both rail and sea transport. Well, blimey, you've had nearly a decade to work this out. It's absolutely staggering that they're still floundering around. Anyway, they're hoping to bring the number of HGVs down from around 1,000 a day maximum to around 700 if they can get their some of these new proposals on sea and rail through, but they don't seem to be terribly convinced that they're going to be capable of doing that even now. The irony is that, and one thing I apologize, that's kind of snuck up on us a bit, is that there's what they call the early years. Now, the early years are the first 2 to 3 years of the construction. And during that time, they won't have built the railway link or the link road bypass. So the traffic will be coming down the current B1122. And that amount of traffic will actually be somewhere in the region of 600 HGVs a day, which ironically means that the average day at that point will have more trucks coming down the current road through Middleton, through the middle of Theberton, than will be on a normal day with the link, once the link road is built, which is absolutely farcical. And so the early years is something that we're going to lobby hard on, that it is not reasonable for them to be putting that number of trucks down the current road, and that they need to get their roads sorted and their rail sorted first. The second thing I quickly want to mention is that those who've been studying the maps as this sort of beast of a link road has emerged will see that they're taking more and more land, and they appear to be over-engineering this route by a massive degree. Just to take just one example, they're putting in something they're called attenuating basins, which are essentially dry ponds, or at least dry for part of the time, where none are needed at the moment. And there are no fewer than 30 of these craters being put along the route of the bypass, completely over-engineered for those of us who know the area and know how water in the sandy area certainly tends to seep away pretty quickly after rain. The final point I'd make is that the alternative route, which has been known as D2 or W, coming from Saxmundham directly across to the site, is, in my view, still not dead. The County Council have told us categorically that it is their preferred option, but EDF have constantly stuck their fingers in their ears over that. And our hope is that if this whole process drags out enough, that might yet be brought back to the table. So those are my points for your feedback, if you'd be so kind, in your consultation process. I'm now going to hand over to Paul, who's going to talk about some of the environmental issues.
Hello. Okay, I don't know whether you can see me on the screen. I'm Paul Collins from the chair of Stop Sizewell C. There are 4 things that I'm going to touch on and talk about tonight, the last one probably being the most important, but the others I thought I would cover so that people have some information about them. The first is this temporary outfall pipe that is going to exit across the beach in front of the Sizewell C. The second is the SSI crossing. I'm going to talk very briefly about beach landing facilities. And then last but not least, the hard coastal defence changes that have appeared in this consultation. The outfall pipe, although it drains onto the beach, will only be for use during high rainfall situations where their water management zones will not be able to cope. And eventually they'll be drilling another pipe underground, which will call the common outfall, which will come out 300 metres offshore. So this isn't a particularly difficult thing, and they would have had to do something anyway. So not surprising, or perhaps surprising, that it wasn't in the original documents for the DCO. The second thing is the SSI crossing, now described as a bridge. It's an interesting description. It's nothing of the sort. The structure is really a causeway and culvert, but with a very wide culvert. It is nothing like the bridge structures that were proposed as options back in the early consultations and still favoured by Natural England. There are still significant issues with this structure for both wildlife as a corridor and for Sizewell marsh drainage into the Minsmere South levels and the sluice. The piling extensions for the permanent BLF with the grillage, as they call it, for the barges to rest on, have some additional impact on the coastal sediment transport. So these could potentially affect people further down the coast at Thorpe Ness and Aldborough, but it was probably going to be fairly limited for that particular part. The new temporary BLF with 4 options are really not options at all. And as Charles was saying, it's amazing that they're still struggling to figure out which options they want and which parts of the rail and the BLF, the temporary BLF, are actually deliverable. The fact of the matter is they should know what they want based on the amount of material they want to move. So these aren't options. It probably means that actually what they really want is option 4 for its capacity to reduce HGV numbers. But we should also remember that they also say that sufficient materials coming through this particular route might actually take trains off the rails as well. So as with the permanent BLF, there's not a lot of impact information about this new temporary BLF. And it's likely that there will be some at least further damaging effects further down the coast. Although because option 4 goes across what I've called the inshore longshore bars, which are the main routes for a lot of the sediment to transport up and down the coast, it'll be less damaging than perhaps options 1 through 3. There has been a suggestion in some quarters that this beach landing facility, which has sort of jack-up platforms for which the conveyor will be sitting on, will turn out to be a conveyor jetty, just like the one they have at Hinkley Point. This is very different from the jetty that was originally proposed, which would take all sorts of much more heavy materials and roll-on, roll-off barges coming to it. But it's still not clear as to what will happen with this, and we'll all have to wait again until we see what is actually submitted to the Planning Inspectorate in January. Lastly, let's come to the hard coastal defence, which is where the maximum damage and impact will be on the coast. The initial height of the coastal defence rises from 10.2 metres to 14 metres. This means that the toe of the rock armour, which goes down to the beach, will move about 8 metres further towards the sea. And it still isn't deep enough because it's going to end midway between high and low tides, which means it will be susceptible as it gets exposed to undercutting by the tides. EDF in the DCO predicted the original defence would be exposed in about 2050. This defence will be exposed to the sea significantly earlier because it's further into the beach, and EDF proposed to adapt the defence in about 2046, raising it to 15 metres and pushing the toe deeper and further towards the sea. No information about how far towards the sea or how deep has been given. It needs to be below the low water spring tides referred to in the original EN6 site assessment documents. But at the moment, we just have a little dotted red line in a rather pathetic sketch showing that it goes deeper than the original toe, which is halfway between low and high tides. So the current sketches have no dimensions, no relationship to the current sacrificial dune, and statements in the consultation question the effectiveness of any soft coastal defence, that is, the sacrificial dune that exists there at the moment, which is going to have to be torn up and rebuilt. The impacts of a hard coastal defence that is closer to the sea will have a much higher impact on the sediment transport towards Thorpeness and Aldborough. But EDF still consider the Greater Sizewell Bay as the only impacted area, despite quoting damage to Thorpeness and Aldborough frontages during the Sizewell B construction as one of the reasons for removing the large jetty at Consultation 3. EDF claim that the new defence will develop additional shingle to the north of the permanent BLF and prevent potential breaches into Minsmere South levels. However, not only can this not be predicted, given the sea level rise and increased storm ferocity and tide levels, there are several weaknesses in the current coastline just north of the site, which could still give rise to breaches into the Minsmere South levels and impact the northern site defence and the SSSI crossing itself. Insufficient information still is not in these documents. Thank you. I hand it back now to Alison.
Thanks, Paul. Firstly, I just want to apologise because some of you have had difficulty getting in, and Zoom randomly changed my password again, and it's done this a couple of times. So I do apologise if you joined late, but I want to just touch on some of the broader context of the current Sizewell C bid to build 2 nuclear reactors here. Of course, following Paul and Charles's presentations, other issues in the consultations, significant ones include the creation of a new fen meadow compensatory habitat in West Suffolk that's brought a whole new community into the fray. And I think, Paul, you managed it, didn't you? We have someone from that community on this call, so really glad to see you here. A new landscaping bund at the Southern Park and Ride, the possibility of changes to the proposals to relocate some of the Sizewell B buildings and facilities, none of which sadly will save Coronation Wood, and eyewitnesses reported that felling started this morning, I'm afraid. We can talk about that a little bit later in this call. So just to give you a bit of context, quote Robert Kennedy, "We are living in interesting times." You will recall that there was quite a bit of media coverage last month about how Sizewell was about to be given a green light in the PM's 10-point plan. And despite industry pressure, that didn't happen, nor was there a specific green light in the National Infrastructure Strategy. What the government did was reiterate its support for nuclear energy, including for large-scale projects, qualifying that with the phrase subject to value for money. But this is really meaningless without specific financing proposals. And an energy white paper, which has been imminent for months, is still imminent. EDF has no money to build Sizewell C. Senior management have said they've got to get the project off their balance sheet. And what's absolutely clear is Sizewell C cannot go ahead without a totally new funding approach. So our theory about why nothing has been made public yet is twofold. Firstly, Brexit negotiations are still ongoing. And you may have seen in the media that state aid, in other words, government help for projects, is one of the main sticking points at the moment. And we've been told that the government may be considering taking a smallish stake in Sizewell C, that's state aid. Incidentally, we've also been told by impeccable but sadly non-quotable sources that Sizewell C could be being used in Brexit negotiations, either as a sweetener or as leverage, which totally is outrageous, of course. Secondly, the Treasury seems to be not very enthusiastic about the regulated asset-based model, which industry has been very strongly pressing for. And for those who don't know about RAB, this is where we'd all pay a surcharge on our energy bills, and that money would be used to give a guaranteed return to investors who put in capital sums into big projects like Sizewell C. Now, the Treasury have determined that the RAB still counts as government debt, and logically it would therefore seem that that would count as state aid. So if what we're being told is true about the potential funding structure for the project, something like 80% of the total cost, that's at least 16 billion, and it could be more depending on how much EDF's new proposals will cost them if they decide to go ahead with them, needs to be raised from private equity. Now, we're also being told that China General Nuclear would seem to be out of Sizewell C, with the government fast tracking on removing Huawei from the UK's 5G network. China General Nuclear, which is also blacklisted by the US, has clearly seen the writing on the wall and has either been pushed or possibly backed out gracefully. And since we've heard nothing about any withdrawal from Hinkley, it's possible that the latter is true. Meanwhile, I think everybody is recognising that other technologies get us further faster. You'll hopefully remember from our last call how Sizewell C won't be operating until 2034 and won't offset the carbon dioxide emitted from construction until 2040. Renewables are even cheaper than the government previously acknowledged. And all the time, further energy scenarios are being published, which, you know, more and more show that very high percentage renewable energy scenarios are possible. You should watch out for the Committee on Climate Change's annual report coming out on Wednesday. I haven't seen it, but I'm hoping that there's some interesting stuff in there. So then the money that the government has so far promised to nuclear is a drop in the ocean compared to what the industry needs. And Nuclear Intelligence Weekly wrote last week how the UK seems to be favouring research and development over new builds. And that's evidenced by the support for Rolls-Royce's small modular reactor technology. You might have seen in the press a few days ago an appeal for a site for a nuclear fusion test project. Meanwhile, I think probably not since our last call, but Hitachi's withdrawal from the project at Wolver on Anglesey, I think kind of shocked a lot of people. But since then, a US consortium has expressed interest in that. So I also just want to reiterate that especially because they are now consulting us on these new proposals, EDF cannot get planning consent for Sizewell C before the end of 2021, which previously it was hoping. We're not sure exactly how long the delay will be, but it seems to be at least 2 to 3 months. So that's probably going to be early 2022. The operating licenses it needs, those decisions may well not be made until mid 2022. And as Paul has described, you know, the lack of concrete plans for a permanent sea defence, you know, seem to have exasperated government agencies. So there's clearly a long way to go on that. There's a lot more that I could say, things that I'm sure all of you have been very familiar with. Our report about Sizewell C's impact on the local economy and the claims about jobs. You know, who knows what the effect of COVID has been on the schedule for Hinkley Point. But, you know, these are all things that we can talk about more in the Q&A if you would like to do that. So I'm going to suggest that we pause it there. And, you know, during this, after we've had some questions and a bit of discussion, we can then sort of come back to talking about what you should do. And in that, we've got some other suggestions of things that would really help. You know, for example, there is an additional, not a consultation, but there is a deadline at the end of this week for people to object to EDF's application to East Suffolk Council for changing the proposals of how they want to rearrange the Sizewell site to make space for Sizewell C. So I am just going to open the chat box and see if anybody's asked any questions. Oh no, they haven't. What shock. So please ask questions.
Sorry, Alison, we've asked a question, but I'm not quite sure. We've typed it, but not quite sure how to send it to you.
Can you see in the bottom bar on your screen, there is a chat box. As long as the blue everyone is highlighted, then we will all see it. So ask away. But in the meantime, we've got quite a few suddenly coming in. Right, so Josie asks, is there any other option for a nuclear plant in the UK besides Sizewell? I.e., if government say they support nuclear, is there anything but Sizewell? Well, Josie, I'll answer that. And I touched on it very briefly. So what we understood to be the case in the summer is that the government was looking very favourably on the project in Anglesey, Wolverneworth, which was being promoted by a company called Horizon, whose parent company was the Japanese firm Hitachi. And for all sorts of reasons, you know, for the levelling up agenda, the fact that the West Coast has sort of much more favourable geology than the East Coast, and, you know, very kind of active support for the project from sort of local authorities. The government did seem to be thinking that that looked strong. So when Hitachi pulled out, which they did in September, just before they were due to get a decision on planning consent, I think the company in the UK was very, very shocked. And I think the government was quite shocked too. This US consortium has come in and said they're interested in the site, but they have the same challenges that EDF have on funding. So if the government does decide to approve a new funding model, then that potentially opens the door to that project, but also opens the door to Sizewell as well. Having said that, the amount of capital that these developers need to find in order to build these projects is absolutely enormous, and there's going to be a huge amount of competition for that kind of money in the whole of the rest of the Prime Minister's 10-point plan, of which the first item was this very ambitious increased target for offshore wind. So if you're a pension company and there really isn't lots of capital just lying around waiting for a project to come along and say, hi, invest in us, what are you going to choose if you've got the option to choose invest in nuclear or to invest in offshore wind or invest in some of the other technologies that the Prime Minister was promoting in the 10-point plan? So that, you know, that is a real question for us. The Bradwell project in Essex, which is promoted by China General Nuclear, is widely recognised to be dead just because the politics of China General Nuclear building and running, not necessarily running, but building a reactor of their own design in the UK is very, very, very controversial. Having said that, the Chinese have got a lot of patience, and they may well be prepared to wait a decade or more and, you know, see if the opportunity arises in the future.
Alison, sorry, could I just ask a quick follow-up on this?
Yes, do, Josie.
I'm just trying to understand. I mean, obviously where Sizewell is has all these huge environmental issues because it's in the middle of an area of natural beauty and the SSSI. Is there any possibility that EDF or anybody else for that matter says, why are we trying to build this in a place that's so delicate, and why are we not building, you know, no matter who's the investor, why wouldn't the government say you can build a nuclear plant in this place and let's get people who are interested in it? I mean, this might be too much for tonight, but I just kind of can't understand why EDF keeps knocking on this door when it just seems so crazy.
Well, the simple answer is this is their site. And this is one of the few sites that they have which has been designated for development. Admittedly in a national admittedly in a national policy statement that's out of date, but they have expressed an interest in building in Moorside, but that's some way down the line.
Okay, thank you.
So we're going to try and I'm going to try and pick out questions that are to do with the consultation. Marilyn is asking, what is the work going on around the railway? Is evening freight trains would be 7 times a night? What are our views? Charles, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so you rightly pointed out, yeah, it could go up to 7 trains, sorry, 8. So the maximum that they seem to be capable of achieving is 8 trains, that's 4 in and 4 out a day in 24 hours, of which only 1 would be in the day because of the passenger route. And I think there may be some disruption to the passenger timetable even to achieve that. Sorry, excuse me. I'm back. Yeah, so yeah, don't have a house along the railway line. You're going to have 7 trains a night, potentially. At the moment, I believe it's 5 trains a night. Is that right, Ali?
Yes, and there would be, EDF is saying there's even the possibility of 10 trains at very peak. But I think what Charles said at the beginning is really important. These are speculative plans. You know, EDF's talking about the potential. Frankly, you know, we don't believe that EDF is going to deliver all of this. And HGVs off the road, more trains at night, you know, the impacts are just going to be felt by different people. And it doesn't make the project as a whole acceptable. And the other thing is that if there are any problems on the railway lines, you know, say a locomotive breaks down on the main line, then, or the beach landing facility can't be used because of bad weather, then everything's going to be back on the roads. So the roads will never go away. These reductions, you know, would always have the potential to be increased again if there were any difficulties. I'm just looking at the questions. Marianne, we'll come on to your question about sort of the how to respond shortly. Simon, we might come back to yours because it's more kind of policy oriented. Alison, you're asking about the Sizewell community newsletter that's gone into homes and what's being done to counteract the propaganda of this leaflet. Charles, Paul, any of you like to take that?
Well, I think we'd just say we've done our own propaganda. A very good leaflet with some help went to most houses in the constituency. I think that, can you remember the footprint, Ali?
There were 45,000 leaflets sent altogether, and it was to the majority of the Suffolk coastal constituency. And Alan and Christine, who I think are on this call, were brilliant at helping us to get that together and supporting us in lots of ways.
And we might do a follow-up.
Okay, I live in Wenniston and I don't remember getting that. And I've been quite alarmed by a lot of the conversation going on the Halesworth community forum as well, which is very pro Sizewell. So I'm just concerned about the use of young people in that on their cover, and the fact that I haven't seen your counter leaflet.
Yeah, yes, if I can come in, Alison, just to say that the area around Raiden and Southwold, we've not seen the counter leaflet. may I make a suggestion, which is that at least you put it on the website so that those of us who are around can download it and circulate it if we can.
Sorry, I may have just cut somebody off in mid-flow. I do apologise.
Just to say, I don't think we've seen the counter leaflet in Theberton either.
Right, well, you definitely should have received it in Theberton. I'll just show you. Oh, this one. It is on our website. If you go to our website and just type NO after put stopsizewellc.org/NO, the leaflet is there, and we can promote it more on social media. Alison, in response to your question, I wrote to the principal of East Suffolk College and asked about the consenting process for those young people to appear, for their photograph to appear on the front of the community newsletter. And I got a slightly defensive reply about how the college just thinks Sizewell C is completely amazing, and of course everybody would be in favour of it. I did send a PDF of our leaflet, and he thanked me and said that they would make that available to pupils, and that normal consenting procedures were used. We have been contemplating the possibility of leafleting again to the whole of the East Suffolk Council area. As you'll appreciate, that takes quite a lot of financial resources to do that. And with this imminent white paper, it's very difficult to confidently go to print on something that might not be out of date the next week. So, deciding to put that amount of money into an initiative we just have to be really careful that we do it at the right time and absolutely get our message right. But I do hope that as many of you as possible who've seen our website and social media saw the projection that we did on the outside of the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy the night before the Prime Minister, the Business Secretary and the Chancellor were due to meet to talk about nuclear power. And this was a slightly spontaneous initiative. It just felt really important not to just let that meeting happen and to do something. And we happened to know some people with the right tech. So a WhatsApp message was sent at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. And by 6 o'clock that evening, our logo and a white elephant were all over the outside of the Bays building. And Simon Jack's article on the BBC writing about that meeting used the image, and we feel sure it will have numerous outings in the future. So that's the kind of thing that we are able to do, and we will continue to try to do to creatively get our message across. I'm sorry, I'm just scrolling down. There's an awful lot of brilliant questions about sort of nuclear power and lots of sort of policy issues. But Anita is asking about Coronation Wood. So Jenny, you're on the call. I think you might want to answer this, or Chris. Have they been allowed to start cutting trees down when they don't have full planning? Chris, are you there? Would you like to answer that? No.
I'll answer it if you like.
Yes, go for it, Paul.
They do have planning permission to do it, unfortunately. Fact of the matter is that the legal challenges to East Suffolk's approval of the original plan to take Coronation Wood down and the various car parks and other hard standing is actually active. It's been passed, so we can't stop them actually doing this, even though it is still part of the Sizewell C DCO. With some changes, which is the hybrid application that is going in right this minute. But effectively, the ability for EDF to take Coronation Wood down is active, and they are in fact doing so.
Marianne's got a comment, stroke question about the sort of rail plans and mitigation. Are you there, Marianne? Do you want to ask your question?
Well, it was just to highlight to everyone that I understand from the Planning Aid England workshop I attended and from reading the huge document that the decibel level at which they plan to mitigate any noise or vibration for the additional train traffic will be a lot higher than other projects, other industrial projects, and they actually propose less mitigation. So I don't want anyone to be under the impression, even if you don't live near a railway line, that this isn't going to affect people's lives, and we should stand shoulder to shoulder by anyone else that's affected. So even if your area or you don't think you're affected by that, please don't say you would prefer rail. Say that we don't think this is the solution because it's not going to be mitigated at the right level, even if it is practical to go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there's a couple of other issues about sort of, you know, the RSPB and National Trust and their support. So the RSPB's Love Minsmere live broadcast last week had a sign-up action, and they, I was told by Adam last Friday, Adam Rowlands from the RSPB, that it was their fastest online action ever. So they reached 20,000 signatures very quickly. I don't know where they are now, but they were really pleased with the response. And they see this as part of a process of building up their support base, which is actually more than 1 million people, to be at their most active and vocal at the really critical time when this decision becomes intensely political. In other words, when it is on the desk of the Secretary of State, which will be sort of towards the end of next year. The National Trust, they at the time of the DCO, they started being much more vocal. They're extremely worried about the impact on Dunwich Heath. They're worried about construction tourists. They're worried about the displacement of walkers from other areas, like Kenton Hills, for example, going up onto the Heath and increasing the impacts there. So they are increasingly active, which was great.
The RSPB is nearly up to 23,000 now.
Fabulous, that's great to know. Carolyn is asking, on rail noise and vibration, they mentioned 600 houses, but not where they are. Can we push EDF to identify these for each community? I think that's really important, and I would hope that the town and parish councils will be doing that on behalf of residents, but you know, that is something that people might like to put in their responses. Josie's up. Well, we'll come on to sort of procedural questions about sort of how to respond in a minute. I see questions from Josie and Diane. Joy is saying, disappointed the consultation ended on the 30th of September, yet on the 1st of October, Therese Coffey announced she was in favour. She couldn't possibly have seen all the responses. Yes, quite right. I mean, the responses didn't go online for some time. And more infuriating for us was the fact that on the 6th of October, less than a week after the close of that Section 56 period, EDF wrote to the Planning Inspectorate saying it intended to consult on new proposals. And those new proposals it must have been thinking about for a very long time. So it really what EDF really should have done was in September to say, hang on, we think we might have some new ideas, let's pause this process, we'll consult you on those ideas and then we'll reopen the process. Instead, everybody bust a gut getting their relevant representations in by the 30th of September, only to discover that everything was changing. So again, we'll come back to sort of procedural stuff. Anita's asking what rail routes they're using to connect with the site. Paul, do you want to take that?
Is that what rail routes?
Yes.
To connect to the site?
Yeah.
Well, the green rail route is where they want to put the stuff into the site. Initially, they'll have to go into the land behind Eastland's industrial estate. Further than that, as far as we are aware, they've not completely decided where all their aggregate is coming from, which would be the bulk of the material. As far as we know, a lot of it's coming from Somerset, which is the current quarry that is actually supplying Hinkley Point. There have been sort of assertions in this document that some might come from dredged off the North Sea somewhere, although we're not exactly sure about where that might be, although that has happened in the past. Opposite Great Yarmouth and Lowestoft, there are some gravel grounds there, but it is not clear where all of this will come from. But if it's coming from the Somerset area, they have to come through Ely Junction and Ipswich, which are the two areas where there are perhaps the most crowded parts of the network in this area, which is probably why they're having so much trouble getting additional trains in. That's before you start considering the East Suffolk line, which is single track most of the way, and why they originally wanted a passing point at and around Campsie Ash. But apparently somebody's already built on a bit of that, which makes it a little difficult. So who knows? I don't know whether that answers your question, but as with a lot of these things, insufficient information.
Okay, I suggest we sort of talk a little bit more about the sort of procedural side of things now, and if people have got more questions, we can sort of come back to those things. So this is a consultation by EDF. So it is to EDF that we are supposed to respond rather than the Planning Inspectorate. That's not to say we shouldn't let the Planning Inspectorate know our views. Our feeling is that the nature of these proposals is so uncertain and so speculative that, you know, they're really putting, it's very unreasonable, A, that they should be asking us on things that they don't know for certain they can deliver, and B, that they're asking these questions at this very late stage. I mean, as Charles said right at the start, you know, they've had 10 years to look at these possibilities. So if these things are serious options, why has it taken them so long to propose them? So that's our recommendation one, that you should complain that they are consulting us about things they don't know it can deliver, and that it's taken them 8 to 10 years to get to suggest these things. Secondly, our very strong feeling, and you know, it is for you to decide if you agree with this, that these proposals do not change our overall objection to Sizewell C. I think that, you know, they have seen the concerns of Chase Coffee and the councils, particularly about traffic, and they've gone, oh, we've got a problem about traffic, we've got to fix the traffic problem. And they're desperately casting about for ways that they can get lorries off the roads. They don't know that they can do that. And if there are any problems with either of those two things that are being suggested, everything will go back on the roads. And I think that EDF grossly have misunderestimated the feelings of local people if they think that our only objection was about the traffic. So that is our strong recommendation, that you write to EDF and say, if you think this has fixed it, you're wrong. If you want to highlight any of the individual issues that we've discussed or that are in the proposals, for example, if you're in West Suffolk and you want to talk about, you know, the compulsory purchase potentially of this land in Pakenham, if you live on the railway lines and you want to talk about the extra trains, if you live on, you know, the Sizewell Link Road and you want to talk about the extra land they need there, or if you, as Marianne suggests in Solidarity, you want to talk about all of those things, even if they don't affect you directly, that's up to you, how much detail you want to go into. What we will do is we will refer to, you know, most of these things, but we're not going to write a huge long consultation because, frankly, you know, these proposals don't deserve it. There are a number of ways in which you can respond. What we would recommend is sending an email to the Sizewell C info at email address, which is on our website, or using their free post address. Obviously posting it in enough time to be sure it arrives on the 18th. EDF has an online form, and we don't recommend using that, simply because it pigeonholes you into answering questions about, you know, the individual aspects of the proposals. They've got boxes. Do you think this is appropriate, inappropriate? Don't know. If you do feel that's the only way you can respond, then we recommend you tick the inappropriate boxes wherever they're available. and using any comment boxes to convey the messages that we've just talked about. There, again, on our website, there are a number of places where we recommend you send copies to. The planning inspectorate for their information, your MP, that's either Therese Coffey, or if you're in Dan Pulse's constituency or Peter Alders's constituency, or our friends from West Suffolk. You may be, I'm not sure who it would be. Would it be Matt Hancock or others? The Suffolk County and District Council leaders and their cabinet leads, so Matthew Hicks and Steve Gallant, Richard Rout and Craig Rivet. Again, all of the addresses are on our website. And if you're a Suffolk resident, your own county and district councillors. And it would be great if you could copy those responses to us too. Paul, do you want to talk about the timetable, or we can also briefly talk about EDF's application to Suffolk Council about the Sizewell B?
Just before we do that, there's a couple of questions that have been asked that haven't really been answered. Sorry. There was an early one about Fukushima, and I think somebody was obviously worried about seismic events. That's one of the reasons they've actually made some changes and proposals to the hard coastal defence. At Hinkley Point, they actually referenced problems with potential tidal waves coming from the Azores and that sort of area, because there is a particular cliff that might fall over. For here, it's Norway. There is an underwater shelf that could collapse and has done in the past, but it's not mentioned. So that's the answer to that. There's another question here about the early years transport plan with defined routes and ANPR controls. Actually, they're proposing to use GPS now for all of their controls. They're using it at Hinkley Point. And yes, it is still the HGV route effectively. So that's the only other answer I'll give on that. So they do exist, but as Charles says, it's still a huge amount of traffic coming down the B1122 before the Sizewell Link Road or any other road is D2 or whatever is actually produced. So that is something, timing is something we need to press the planning inspectorate on later on, but that is an issue for everybody. Okay, you wanted me to talk about something else, Alison?
Well,
timing?
yeah, so there's a couple of questions I'll come back to, but do you want to talk about what we think this means for the schedule, for the whole process?
Well, yeah, I think you sort of partially covered it earlier. I mean, the fact that this consultation has been imposed or interspersed within what would normally be the examination period or preparations for the examination period means there's probably about a 3-month delay on everything going forward. We have yet to see what EDF will actually propose the week of January the 11th, which in other words, what will actually make it into the DCO. Then the inspectors have to decide whether they accept it. They will also decide whether some things are material changes or small changes. They have an issue that they need to be able to allow Pakenham to come back and be part of this process, because Pakenham, for instance, was not an affected area during the original process, so they haven't got a relevant representation. East Suffolk Council and Suffolk County have actually requested of Planning Inspectorate that they make time available for new relevant representations to be submitted from people who are no longer were previously not involved. And also, obviously, all of our relevant representations may require some adjustment, including those from the county, the district council, and the various statutory consultees like Natural England, Marine Management Organisation and Environment Agency, and others. So a huge amount has to go on, including work with the ONR when they want additional material, additional space within the Sizewell A complex. So yeah, 3 months is probably how long it's going to be delayed. Exactly when the examination will get started is not clear. With everything that has to be done, whether it'll take a week or a month for the examining authorities to actually agree whatever EDF propose. And then there has to be at least a month, I would say, and possibly longer, for everybody to adjust what their objections are before they can then go and consider what will be examined and what the examination timetable is. So the whole thing has been pushed back. It's not clear by how much.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions here. Ivor and Jean are asking, if we email our response to EDF, should we not copy that same email to our MP and local councillors? And the answer to that is absolutely yes, with one caveat. Therese Coffey will only respond to emails where she is the addressee. In other words, if she's in the CC field, she won't look at it. So so do send your response to her separately. Extra work for us, but hey. Richard asked, if we use email, will they treat that as valid as the online form, which gives them easy stats in favour against? Don't know. I think the email allows us to be a lot freer with what we say. It forces them to read it rather than just sort of scanning down the answers in the form. So, you know, we very, very strongly recommend responding in that way. Oh dear, and so many of you told us that our leaflet was not received. I'm going to ask the Royal Mail for a huge refund. That's really shocking.
When was it posted?
It was circulated in was it July or August? So it was some time ago. So you might have seen it and forgotten, which is even sadder. But yeah, it was in the summer that we did it.
It was just as we came out of the last lockdown, because I delivered them to businesses, Alison.
So you did.
Oh no, sorry, we thought you were talking about a reply to this latest propaganda with the children on the front.
Right. No, sadly, we're holding on to our pennies until we know a little bit more about what the government is proposing. You'll all be delighted to know that on my phone, a BBC breaking news story has popped up saying that a Brexit trade deal is not there, and there are differences still to be discussed. So, you know, actually a no deal scenario is not great for us with Sizewell C. So we have to wait with bated breath to see what happens. Oh, Rachel says she got the leaflet. Thank you. Fantastic. Chris, you were saying about Coronation Wood. Just briefly, the 10th of December is the deadline for sending an objection to East Suffolk Council about EDF's revised proposals for relocating Sizewell B facilities. On our website, on the same page, the Take Part in the Planning Process page, you can see some guidance about what to say, but it's actually very simple, which is that it's wrong for East Suffolk Council to be making this decision. It should only be considered as part of the main planning process. And as we have just discussed, you know, it is already too late for Coronation Wood. Chris, do you want to come in and just have a few words about that particularly?
Yeah, well, only really just to endorse what you were saying. Too late for Coronation Wood, unfortunately. Seems ridiculous. It's going to end up being potentially a car park, depending on what plans do get approved at the end of the day, if anything. It's just an extreme loss of the woodland. And and basically, if anyone does go up there and takes photos or video footage, it would be good to share that around, because there's quite a lot of interest on social media about the wood being chopped down. So it'd be good to get that shared.
Can we get the media to go and show it happening as a you know, advertising the, you know, this is the beginning of what you're likely to face? And media not going to cover it, what they're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. There is some discussion going on between people today about you know, getting the media down there, as Chris said, sharing photographs. If you're interested in finding out more specifically about what's happening at Coronation Wood, can you drop me an email and I'll pass it on to the people who are sort of coordinating that particular work.
Thank you.
Paul is asking, how did our walk around with the council get on, please? So last Friday, Paul and I took Craig Rivet and Richard Rout for a walk, along with Ben McFarlane from the Suffolk Wildlife Trust and Adam Rowlands from the RSPB. We'd originally planned to do a circular walk from Eastbridge, but as you may recall, it was snowing rather a lot initially. So we did a slightly shorter walk from the Kenton Hills car park to the sea and back. If you've not done that walk, I do recommend it, and make sure you wear wellies, because it's very muddy and flooded in places, but it takes you through the main construction site. And I think the councillors were quite shocked by what they saw, and they were also very, very interested in some of the real specific detail about impacts on populations of barber's-tailed bats and natterjack toads, for example. Paul, do you want to add something?
All I was going to say is, actually, if you like, I'll put that, we can put that the map and the annotated map on our website. So if you want to see how to do it from the Eel's Foot in all the way, and it'll give you some pointers as well. Or you can always start at Kenton Hills if you wish, and just do the back and forth.
And there's a lovely lady called Ruth, who I'm not sure is on this call, but she started an initiative called Suffolk Artists Walking Against Sizewell. And she wants to help encourage people and sort of get people together to take walks. So I'm going to do a walk with her in the morning so that we can talk about everything that you can see. So watch out for her on social media. Marianne, do you want to quickly say your outrageous information that you learned? Are you there, Marianne?
No, happy for you to cover it. Thanks, Alison.
Yeah, so, well, just very briefly, EDF, after many judicial review challenges by Together Against Sizewell C, you know, they finally got the permission, if you like, for that planning consent that they were given last year and that is why they are starting work on Coronation Wood. But in the meantime, they submitted a subsequent proposal, but they have to pay money every time they submit these new proposals. And they've paid, I think it's £40,000 for each proposal. So a total of £80,000 has been paid to East Suffolk Council for these planning applications. And, you know, EDF is obviously doing this because it's desperate to get started on the work, because all of this work on relocating the facilities of Sizewell B is supposed to be completed by the time they actually start the Sizewell C project itself. So that's why they're in such a hurry. Paul's saying that we're going to get our walking map onto the Sizewell C website. You might remember last June on Suffolk Day, we did a lovely circular walk and about 40 of you came along, and it would have been great to have done it again this summer, or indeed to do it, you know, at any point, but sadly COVID has rather impacted our ability to get together. So any more questions? If for any reason we've overlooked your question, perhaps you can let us know. There's lots of comments I can see in the chat box. Michael Simon's talking about, you know, the impacts of park and rides on local communities, which obviously is extremely important. There's been quite a bit of discussion about climate change. I think when I met Nadeem Zahawi, the Bayes minister, in March, what he said to me was that what he was worried about was the decade 2030 to 2040, because by 2040 he was very confident that the technology and, you know, the adaptations to our energy use and, you know, delivery through the grid, those would all be progressing extremely well. And, you know, we immediately made the point that Sizewell C would not be operating until the mid-2030s, even assuming that there were no delays. And of course, EDF's own documentation show it'll take until 2040 to offset the CO2 from construction. So, you know, it doesn't help that decade at all. And the Prime Minister's new target for 68% CO2 emission reductions by 2030, which was just announced last week, once again, Sizewell C does not help government in that target at all. So on that emphatic note, unless there are any more questions, maybe we should call it an evening.
Alison, may I?
Yes, of course, John.
Not very good on the things. One of the things that I think I'm not alone in being very concerned about is that East Suffolk Council and how they're handling things. I mean, I'm delighted with what you said about getting councillors actually on the ground to have a look at this, but it's a matter of actually trying to put more pressure on this council. They've got to be. Well, I do not have confidence in their fairness on this. I mean, there were one or two councillors who have done a gallant job or tried to, but I'm not sure whether people are aware of the fact that there is an issue there. There's a disconnect between them and the county council. The county council seem to be much harder line on Sizewell than East Suffolk do. You're probably well aware of this. You're probably doing stuff, but I'm just want to flag it up for people. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, John. And you're absolutely right. And that's why it's very important you copy your district councillors and the district council leader and Sizewell C lead on your responses to these consultations. Of course, there are county council elections next May. Sadly, we don't get the opportunity to vote in district council elections for a while. But we have been talking internally about sort of ways to step up our engagement with district councillors. Obviously, we've got some fantastic district councillors. We've got our green district council friends, independent district council friends, you know, who are very strongly with us in opposing Sizewell C. So, you know, it's not a totally bleak picture, but we can definitely do more. Somebody's asked the giant molehills on the other side of Theberton. These are pits being dug for archaeological surveys on the route of the Sizewell Link Road, and that field on the right as you leave the village is where the link road would rejoin the B1122. So that's what that is.
And it's where the B1122 will make a T-junction with the new link road.
Yes, because that bit of the B1122 leaving the village is going to be converted into a footpath, much to the edification of many of our village residents. Great.
Alison,
Okay.
can I just ask one question? I'm sorry, I probably wouldn't be type it quick enough.
Yeah, go for it, Simon.
On that note, you were saying about the T-junction from the village forming Moat Road. Moat Road is very much a single track road with only 2 or 3 passing places, the whole length of it. And a lot of the traffic goes along Pretty Road, which is a much wider road. Is there any thing that's raising that with EDF in that Moat Road is just totally not suitable as a route from Saxmundham to the main road because it would just become stuffed, as we've seen when the main road was closed a few weeks ago or a couple of months ago with some roadworks in the village for a couple of days, and Moat Road just became absolutely chock-a-block with traffic trying to pass each other.
Yes, Simon, I don't think Moat Road actually connects at all to the Sizewell Link Road. Moat Road, it's not clear on the latest plans, but originally what EDF said was that Moat Road coming from Saxmundham would then actually do a right-hand bend and go in front of Bill Turnbull's property.
Right. Yeah, it does.
I can't quite work out whether that's still their intention or not. There does seem to be something there, but that's about it. As far as Pretty Road is concerned, that's still got just a footbridge over, and we keep pressing EDF on the whole business from Theberton of actually having a proper bridge there. Otherwise, Theberton is effectively kettled in.
Yeah.
But actually, you've got an opportunity to talk to them directly if you want to come on Wednesday night, because they're coming to the Theberton Eastbridge Parish Council meeting.
Ah, right.
And Richard Bull will be there, so please do turn up and ask a question.
I will then, but no, just to clarify, there is, so that just beyond us, but before you get to what they call George Road, I think, which is the road that goes up to the Grange.
Yeah.
Moat Road is actually going to fork. So you'll be able to go right, as you say, past the Grange and unobstructed. And then you'll fork left, and there's then a T-junction to join the link road. So my concern is that people coming out of the, well, not just people coming out of the village, but people using the B1122 will go on to the link road, turn right, and then turn left onto Moat Road, and then start using that as a road through to Saxmundham, which is just, it wouldn't take it. That's what I'm trying to say. Pretty Road is a much wider road and you can pass easily. Whereas if all that traffic is going to start coming up Moat Road, it's just totally not suitable at all.
I didn't see that, but maybe I need to go and look at that plan again then, Simon.
Yeah, it's a T-junction where we join, where Moat Road will effectively join on. So you'll turn. So for us to go to the village, we would go onto the link road, turn right, and then turn left, and then come back into the village, and probably get killed on the way.
I hope not.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, you know, this consultation only covers a few proposals, and there's lots of information that kind of is still emerging out of the DCO. So I'm sure if you have any kind of specific or detailed questions about EDF proposals overall, don't hesitate to email us. If we can't help you, we'll tell you. We might tell you where to look, or we might know, in which case obviously we'll share that information. But unless there's any other questions sort of about the kind of procedure as you know, what to do, and Marianne's just posted a reminder to encourage you to copy us in, then that will give us an idea of the kind of things that people say, so that when the planning inspectorate says, oh, EDF told us X, Y, and Z, we know whether that's true or not. And what I should have said right at the start was it was absolutely incredible how many people registered as interested parties and submitted relevant representations by the 30th of September. So we were absolutely blown away. We were kind of hoping sort of the high hundreds, and it was 1,200 individuals and businesses. Some of those, a few of those were in support of Sizewell C, but the vast majority were expressing concern. And something like 300 of you endorsed Stop Sizewell C's relevant representation. So thank you very much indeed for doing that. So please keep up the good work. And it looks like Nick and Nigel are having conversations about cycling. I'm going to stop the recording now on this note. Remember to respond by the 18th of December, but I'll stick around for a bit. So if people have got additional questions, then feel free to ask. So I will formally end the meeting here.
Alison, can I just say from myself and Jean, what a useful evening event this has been for us. Thanks very much. Much appreciate the effort.
Yeah, thank you everyone.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.